denuclearization. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is in Pyongyang now as the Asian superpower steps up its efforts to mend ties with its longtime ally while trying to avoid the so-called China passing. This rare visit to the north follows the landmark inter-Korean summit last Friday, in which the two Koreas agreed to work toward complete denuclearization. And before I sit down with an expert to talk more about this, let's first check out the top stories at this hour with our Devin Whiting at the News Center. Hello, Devin.
Hi, June. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he will seek the dismantlement of North Korea's nuclear program without delay. He made the remarks as he was formally sworn in as America's top diplomat with a strong endorsement from President Trump. Kim Mo-gyun reports.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has stressed that North Korea must commit to a swift dismantling of its weapons programs. Pompeo outlined his priorities while speaking at his ceremonial swearing-in on Wednesday, highlighting the importance of Pyongyang abandoning its nuclear weapons as well as its ballistic missiles.
We are committed to the permanent, verifiable, irreversible dismantling of North Korea's weapons of mass destruction program, and to do so without delay.
Pompeo, who secretly met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang in early April, also said that efforts to denuclearize North Korea are still in the beginning stages, with their outcome yet unknown. He also stressed that the Trump administration is fully committed to solving the North's nuclear issue.
This administration will not repeat the mistakes of the past. Our eyes are wide open. It's time to solve this once and for all. A bad deal is not an option.
Meanwhile, the South Korean and U.S. military revealed on Thursday that movement has been spotted at North Korea's Punggye-ri nuclear test site, where the regime carried out a total of 6 nuclear tests from 2006. Intelligence sources say that activity at tunnel entrance number 3 suggests Pyongyang could be signaling that it has started to follow through on Kim Jong-un's promise made at the inter-Korean summit last week to shut down the test site. This follows a report by CBS News on Wednesday that said North Korea has started removing cables from the tunnels at the site, describing it as a first step to closing down the tunnels. Kim Mo-gyun, Arirang News.
South Korea and the U.S. have completed their annual Key Resolve joint military drill. The regular 2-week exercise began on April 23rd. A South Korean military official told Arirang News Thursday morning that all operations have ended and the after-action review to evaluate the drill will take place on Friday. Last Friday, for the Inter-Korean Summit, the computer-simulated exercise was halted for 1 day. And considering the changing dynamics on the Korean Peninsula, this year's Key Resolve exercise was not open to the media, and the U.S. did not deploy strategic assets like aircraft carriers. Multiple reports say the 3 Americans still detained in North Korea have been released from the regime's labor camps and moved to a hotel near Pyongyang ahead of their possible release. The Trump administration says it's looking into the details, and the president himself seems to be preparing for a big announcement. Shin Se-min reports.
President Trump taking to Twitter late Wednesday local time. As everybody is aware, the past administration has long been asking for 3 hostages to be released from a North Korean labor camp, but to no avail. Stay tuned. His tweet was posted moments after U.S. officials confirmed they were looking into reports the 3 remaining American detainees in North Korea have been relocated from a labor camp to a hotel near Pyongyang. The Financial Times quoted campaigners that said North Korea has freed the prisoners as a goodwill gesture. AFP, citing South Korean activists with contacts in the North, reports that North Korea and the U.S. are extremely close to reaching a deal on the detainees' release. North Korea's human rights abuses are likely to make up a significant bulk of the agenda during the upcoming summit between leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump that should happen sometime in May or early June. The Trump administration has long been demanding the North free the detainees Kim Hak-song, Tony Kim, and Kim Dong-chul. It was reportedly brought up during a one-on-one between the then CIA Director Mike Pompeo and Kim Jong-un when Pompeo, now Secretary of State, made a secret visit to Pyongyang in early April. And watching this unfold before the upcoming Kim-Trump summit is surreal to a relative of one of the detained Americans. Sol Kim says he's hopeful North Korea will take steps toward peace and release his father, Tony Kim, unharmed.
I think for me and our family, I think it's hopeful. I think that North Korea is engaging in communications with different countries, that they're not closed anymore.
Seoul has not heard from his father since he was arrested in North Korea in April 2017. And to this day, he checks in with the State Department on a weekly basis for updates. With the latest developments that seems to suggest his father could be home soon, Seoul says he's calm.
Just, I think all I can do and our family can do is be patient.
Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in invited the country's 4 key political and government leaders to the Blue House today for lunch to brief them on the results of the recent inter-Korean summit, as well as to tell them about his upcoming diplomatic schedule. This was the first meeting of its kind since the summit. Initially, the invitation was extended to the so-called 5 next in command: Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun, National Assembly Speaker Chung Se-kyun, Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court Lee Jin-sung, Head of the National Election Commission Kwon Soon-il, and Supreme Court Chief Justice Kim Myung-soo. But Chief Justice Kim Myung-soo is visiting Spain, Argentina, and Chile, so he was unable to attend. A preparatory hearing has begun for the trial of former President Lee Myung-bak, starting just about an hour ago. As expected, he did not attend the hearing, but through his lawyers, he denied all 16 charges of corruption. He's accused of embezzling $32 million from his brother's auto parts company, which the former president is suspected of secretly controlling. He's also charged with taking bribes worth over $10 million from former bank chiefs, lawmakers, and local businessmen. He was arrested in March, becoming the country's 4th former leader to face a criminal trial for corruption. His successor, Park Geun-hye, was sentenced to 24 years in prison last month after being found guilty on separate corruption charges. In a widely expected move, the U.S. Federal Reserve has left rates unchanged. Releasing a statement after its latest policy meeting, the Fed said inflation is finally climbing after years of being stuck below its 2% target level. Lee Seung-jae reports.
Wrapping up a 2-day meeting, the Federal Open Market Committee held U.S. interest rates steady on Wednesday, expressing confidence that a recent rise in inflation would be sustained, putting on track to raise borrowing costs in June. The Fed's decision to leave its benchmark overnight lending rate in a target range of between 1.5% and 1.75% was unanimous. The Fed said inflation had moved close to its target, and the price stability part of its dual mandate from Congress had almost reached its 2% target. Experts say the 2% target is symmetric, meaning it would be equally problematic if inflation lingers too far above or below that level. The Fed's comments on the U.S. labor market were also of interest. It downplayed a recent slowdown in economic and job growth, saying the activity had been expanding at a moderate rate and job gains on average had been strong in recent months. Last month, the Bank of Korea left its key interest rate unchanged, deciding to hold the rate at 1.5%. U.S. interest rates are now higher than South Korea's lending rates. Prior to that, they had been on par with each other since December of last year. Back in the U.S., the Federal Reserve currently forecasts 2 more rate hikes this year, while an increasing number of policymakers see 3 as possible. All eyes turn to the Fed's next meeting in June, when rates are set to go up. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
China's diplomacy in action as its foreign minister is visiting North Korea for the first time in 11 years this week. Wang Yi is now in Pyongyang to talk about the recent developments seen on the Korean Peninsula and to reaffirm Beijing-Pyongyang ties ahead of the summit between North Korea and the U.S. Our Oh Jung-hee has more.
With discussions on the way towards declaring a formal end to the Korean War and turning the armistice agreement into a permanent peace treaty, China is seeking to solidify its role in the negotiations. Meeting with his North Korean counterpart Lee Yong-ho in Pyongyang on Wednesday, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China will continue to play a, quote, positive role in seeking solutions to the Korean Peninsula issue. He also expressed support for North Korea's efforts towards denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula. Welcoming the success of last Friday's inter-Korean summit, the Chinese foreign minister said Beijing backs the improvement of inter-Korean relations as well as North Korea settling its security concerns. He added that the traditional North Korea-China friendship is a shared and precious treasure. The two foreign ministers agreed to improve and strengthen Pyongyang-Beijing relations following their leaders' decision to meet in the near future. Bilateral economic cooperation could have been on the table as well, as a North Korean minister in charge of external economic relations accompanied the North Korean side, according to a report from Pyongyang's state media. This is the first visit to Pyongyang by a Chinese foreign minister in 11 years, raising speculation that China may be concerned about being possibly left out of the discussions to formally end the Korean War with a peace treaty. Last Friday's Panmunjom declaration between the leaders of Seoul and Pyongyang stipulates that ensuring peace on the Korean Peninsula could be discussed trilaterally with the U.S. or in four-way talks with the U.S. and China, leaving open the possibility of China's exclusion. 오정희, Arirang News.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Shin Sang-hyuk from Kyung University joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Very great to be here today.
All right, so for the first time since 2007, Chinese Foreign Minister visited North Korea, Wang Yi, to meet with his North Korean counterpart, Lee Yong-ho. Now, what does his visit mean? And also, this comes amid a flurry of diplomacy over North Korea recently.
Well, to answer your question briefly, well, China showed their concern about the so-called China passing. You know, the Wang Yi, as you mentioned very briefly, in 2007, there was a the visit of Chinese foreign minister to North Korea.
Right.
At the time, the reason why he visited North Korea was to persuade North Korea to participate in six-party talks. But this time, actually, according to the report, the foreign minister Wang Yi, he wanted to persuade or explain why China should be participating in the negotiation for peace treaty, which will happen on the Korean Peninsula. And then actually, second one maybe he wants to, the Chinese government wants to be a main player in the region, because that, you know, China and USA has competed very seriously over the last several years to take the hegemony power in the region, the Pacific region. So in this context, definitely North Korea seems to be very important for the China strategically. So maybe they wanted to maintain, or even if possible, they want to strengthen the cooperative relationship with North Korea.
It definitely seems that China wants to push for that four-way talks between the two Koreas and the U.S. and China, instead of the three-way talks without China.
Exactly, yes.
Now, if Wang meets with Kim Jong-un during his stay in North Korea, what would the two talk about?
Well, I think the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will explain his achievement at the summit meeting with the President Moon Jae-in. Actually, he should explain what they discussed, because as I already explained, that China is concerning about the so-called China passing. So on the part of North Korea, he should explain the very, efficiently, so to speak, what kind of talks they had with President Moon Jae-in, And then secondly, actually, the Wang Yi, maybe he will empathize the relationship between two countries. Well, they always empathize that they are blood-sharing countries. And then secondly, as I already explained before, he will continue to explain why China should participate as one of the main actors for the peace negotiation on the Korean Peninsula, because that, as we know very well, there are many reports about the formation of the so-called trilateral talks without the participation of North Korea for peaceful treatment on the Korean Peninsula. That is really concern of which Chinese government have, because that as I already explained before, strategically North Korea seems to be very important excuse me, for the Chinese government and Chinese national interests.
Right. It's interesting that President Moon has talked directly with President Trump after the summit and with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, but still I don't think he's spoken with Chinese President Xi Jinping. But then we see the diplomacy in action between China and North Korea right after the summit. So we kind of see where these relationships are going ahead of the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
Right.
Yeah.
And the our President Moon Jae-in has emphasized his role. Actually, he wants to set the platform for the eventual solution of the North Korean nuclear crisis. It means that he emphasized the co-work with the USA government. As you know very well, the one day in May, there will be the summit meeting between US President Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Maybe they will be able to discuss more detailed things about the peace treaty, or even they can discuss about how to make the official declaration, ending the Korean War. This can be the first step toward the peace treaty on the Korean Peninsula. But in fact, China is concerned about so-called China passing.
Right.
And maybe on the part of the North Korea, they want to use the China as a kind of some secret card to improve their, capacity at the meeting with the USA President, Mr. Trump. And another one, in fact, the Soviet Union and Japan, they want to participate in some talks in various ways. So there will be the trilateral summit meeting with the participation of Korean President Moon Jae-in and Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang, and then Japanese Prime Minister Abe. According to the report, they will discuss about the denuclearization of North Korea, and then certainly by having some talk about this issue, China and Japan, they want to participate in the negotiation for the peace treaty. And another issue, they will discuss about so-called FTA, three countries FTA. As you know very well, it was, the discussion about this Korea, China, Japan FTA talks, quite a long time ago, but it cannot be progressed very efficiently over the last several years because of political reasons. But I think there must be some needs definitely for all three countries to discuss about the FTA, because that, among the three countries, because that, economies of these three countries showed a little bit slowdown. And as you know very well, China has a very serious trade conflict with potentially with the USA, and also Korea has quite difficult time in the trade with the USA, because even though we finalized the renegotiation for Korea-US FTA, but very recently USA government decided to impose very high tariffs on some Korean products. And how about Japan? And between Japan and Korea, actually because of the sex slavery during the World War II, and the other the Dokdo Island issues, those kind of things made gave the very difficult time to Korea and Japan to strengthen up their cooperative relations. So these are one aspect. Considering all of these, definitely China and the US, China, Japan, and Korea, actually they should use this opportunity to change the current situations, and they want to take the one step further to discuss about step up the cooperative relations by discussing about denuclearization of North Korea and trilateral, Korea, China, Japan FTA.
So like you said, that trilateral summit, which is set to be held next Wednesday in Tokyo, is likely to focus a lot on probably the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But of course, they're probably gonna talk about trilateral economic cooperation, which you mentioned, because it has been kind of absent in the past couple of years because of those political issues. So a Japanese media outlet actually reported recently that the three countries are likely to publish or announce a joint statement after their summit. So if there is one, what can we expect from that?
Well, along with the USA, Japanese government has emphasized the so-called perfect denuclearization. So they use the word dismantle. dismantle means that the eliminate all nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula, particularly
even the ones that are already there.
Yeah, right. And then they should have to verify, and then they want to find it out that the North Korea will not go back to their stance in their nuclear power plant the policy. That means that, well, if you really want to make a progress, North Korea should follow, respect the demands from the USA. That means the erradicable and then the verifiable. Those kind of the terms and conditions seems to be prerequisite for the successful outcome at the summit meeting between the Mr. Trump and the Mr. Kim Jong-un. And then those kind of things, those kind of issues can be included in the declaration at the trilateral summit meeting. But the one thing which I'm really concerned about is actually that could be made before the summit meeting between the USA president and North Korean leader. That means that for USA president, it could be quite the positive ones for him in participating, having some talk with the North Korean leader. But how about the North Korean leader think about this one? Maybe it can be a kind of threats. You know, maybe I think we have to be very careful. Of course, we can empathize that the denuclearization of North Korea is very important. But I think we have to give some rooms to President Trump to discuss about this issue with his North Korean counterpart.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, and ahead of that summit with President Trump, it seems that North Korea is stepping up its diplomacy with some other countries around the world. So what is its intentions of doing that?
Well, North Korea has maintained a very good relationship with the African countries. And then, well, actually, they visit to the several African countries. I mean, they means that the North Korean hire the officials. Mainly they're in charge of the foreign affairs. So, you know, North Korea is right now just coming out from the North Korea. They just try to expose themselves to global community. Maybe, by having a support from those countries, maybe they could feel more comfortable at the various contexts to a global community.
Because it's been isolated for so long.
Yes, so and then they reconfirm their cooperative relations with these countries by sending higher government officials to these countries. And then according to the report, they reconfirm their friendly and cooperative relations with these countries. So maybe I think we can understand their visit to these countries in this way.
So at this point, we see so many countries, superpowers involved in the matters arising from the Korean Peninsula. So at this point, we're wondering, how should President Moon Jae-in successfully hold his mediator role up until the Kim-Trump summit in order to, I guess, ensure a productive outcome from that?
Well, first of all, he will meet the many leaders around the world, particularly Putin, the Russian president. According to the report, he's scheduled to have a summit meeting with the Putin in the near future. And then, as well, we discussed that there will be the trilateral summit with the Chinese leader, and then Prime Minister, and then Japanese Prime Minister. And at the same time, I think he just tried to explain the summit talk with the North Korean leader to many leaders, even to European leaders. So he will just try to expand and deepen his role as a mediator for the peaceful talk and the Korean Peninsula by explaining what he has done to many leaders around the world. Second one is actually he control his what can I say his activities. His role. As we already discussed at the summit meeting with Kim Jong-un, April 27. They discussed many things, but according to the declaration, they just give us some big pictures, so to speak. And then the small pictures will be drawn by the the Trump and then North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So by controlling his role to some degree, definitely he wanted to strengthen the cooperative the relations with the USA. USA is very important for the successful outcome at the summit meeting, or in the efforts to achieve the denuclearization of North Korea and build permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula. And at the same time, also the President Moon Jae-in tried to give the very good image or as a mediator to the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. So I think he wanted to keep this role for a long time, even after the USA and North Korean leaders summit talk. Regardless of the outcome, definitely I think the President Moon Jae-in will have his role as a mediator in an effort to solve the North Korean crisis.
He definitely carries a very important role at this time in this period. Thank you so much for your insight today.
My pleasure.
And that wraps it up for this edition of Arirang News. But stay tuned for more of the day's top stories and an in-depth look at ongoing issues here in Korea and around the world. Thanks for watching and goodbye.
Go for a new look if you're in Korea. Get trendy here in Garosugil.